Sasha, and welcome to everybody for turning up nice and early on this really lovely morning. I heard the weather's supposed to turn tomorrow, so you're getting a lot of the sun and the brightness today, and I'm so delighted to be at Right by the Sea chatting to the wonderful, inimitable Elaine Feeney. Can I give her another round of applause?
Okay.
I can't wait to interrogate you about your writing as a big fan. I wanted to start with All the Good Things You Deserve, because that's your most recent publication, and it is a book of poetry. If people haven't read it, it is so fierce. It's fierce and beautiful, and I don't think anybody writes poetry like you. And I think the topics that you discuss in it are just so urgent. They're both personal and international and national, and they're just, really, really urgent. I felt a real sense of urgency reading it. But I wanted to talk to you about the process of writing it, because you didn't just sit down just to write this work of poetry, did you? It kind of came while you were writing How to Build a Boat, which we'll also get to, and the Booker as well later on. Do you want to tell us about the process of the genesis of writing All the Good Things You Deserve?
And I just want to echo what Aoife said. Thank you so much for turning up so early. I would never turn up at my own event unless it was my event. And the sun is out and the sea is there, so you are heroic. So thank you. I thought I'd be talking to nobody. So really, really genuinely appreciate that. So this poetry collection, I actually thought, I wrote my last collection in 2017, which was actually my fourth collection, which was Rise, because it was the celebration and commemoration of the 1916 Rising, and nobody commissioned me to write a poem about the Rising, which I wasn't one bit surprised about. I wouldn't commission me to write either anything political or, So I decided to write a whole collection around that issue, around women and the commemoration of women in Ireland in the last 100 years in Rise. And I actually felt I had moved into fiction. I thought I had come to the end of poetry with that collection. I just found that I didn't think I had anything substantial to say, that the world was moving so quickly in the last maybe 7 or 8 years that I feel that poetry really tries to excavate the truth of something. And I really didn't know where the ground was, if that makes sense, with regards to what I wanted to say. So I had started out my career very messily as a slam poet back in the noughties, which was a totally inspired by the New York and the Chicago sort of slam poetry at the time. And I loved it. It was angsty and it was oral, and I felt I had political things to say early on in poetry, which is actually a real caveat. You should never approach a poem with a political thing to say. I know that now. And then after Rise, I thought that's it. I just wanted to write in fiction because the poetry was so personal and it was really exposing. And I felt that I had too much skin in the game with the poems, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I went to fiction and I felt really free in fiction, and I felt like, oh my God, I could have been doing this all along, making up stories that are based on nobody. It's fiction, it's fiction. And it was the epilogue of How to Build a Boat. I was writing it in a house in Leitrim, of all places, and I found that really, really difficult for anyone who's read it to figure out Jamie and what was going to happen to Jamie. And it was taking me months and months to kind of talk to him and come to terms with it. And at the same time, so I had some of the poems in this collection written, and then the first poem, All the Good Things You Deserve, started to come in the moments that I was meant to be finishing up the novel, which was a bit frustrating. But I actually went with it because it's based around a very traumatic event, personal event of being assaulted. And I thought to myself, I'm wondering why I have to write this to then write this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
And I had to free myself up, and I just wrote it, and it took 18 months to edit it because I wanted to edit it down to nothing. I wanted it to be almost nothing. It's a sequence of cantos. Yeah. And at the same time, then I felt free to bring Jamie on his voyage, if that makes sense.
So did it feel like
I was blocked, maybe?
Yeah, I suppose did it feel like you had to clear out?
Yeah.
And is it processing the wrong word? Is that too psychological about what you need to do?
Yeah, because I'm always very wary about art being cathartic in any sense, and I wanted it to be art and not a therapy session. But I think I kind of, don't always manage that division. I suppose I felt that if I was to be honest to the readers or the people I had been reading for years, and audiences that I had built up around the poetry, who were very loyal, niche audience, I felt like I had been skirting around personal issues by dealing with the bigger political issues, if that makes sense, and that I didn't really excavate myself at all in the poems, and I just felt maybe that I owed it to myself. And also, like, it was an experience that happened in my 20s. I was now in my 40s and I felt I could actually try to write something about this for the first time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and you know, when you're saying that, it makes me think that when we write about personal things, anybody who's written about a personal thing, it doesn't matter whether you've published it or not, there is this real kind of this feeling that comes out of you that you have to get on the page. But then when you are publishing a poem that is so visceral and, you know, about something that you don't want to be repeating and thinking about necessarily all the time, that can be exposing in its own way, even though it can be also be necessary. So how do you balance that idea that, you know, you're kind of exposing something that's difficult within your life to an audience of people, whether you know them and strangers as well are going to read it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I don't know if I've ever really succeeded in that. But, you know, like, I think of somebody like Annie Ernaux with regards to, you know, her shame book and how removed her voice feels from what happened in that book around her relationship with her father and the actions of her father. And I thought, you know, she fascinates me, and I could never be as removed. I'm a much more emotive writer than that, and I accepted that. I suppose I was grappling with violence against women as a common theme in my work, and as someone who's experienced violent events. This is one, and as I've often said, and I think I know Aoife as a friend, it's probably one of the most benign, I often say it's one of the most benign things that had happened. Within the time of this poem in my early 20s, it's based around a sexual assault, but I had actually been very badly beaten up. That was a case and was recorded, and they were separate events. I had 3 very violent things happen in the space of a very short period of time, and I was always trying to get to the core of that and question it. And this poem felt like the most distant, or the one that I was able to kind of get into. And what I really found when I wrote it was there's a circularity to the work. It goes back on itself a lot, and it goes back on memory a lot. I don't always trust memory with respect to my own experience. You know, the memory is the memory of the memory. It's the last memory you remember. It's the story you're telling yourself. So I suppose in the other situation where I was beaten up, there were witnesses. And that's a fascinating thing for anyone that has ever encountered violence, which makes domestic violence so difficult to talk about, I think. With respect to that, there were clear-headed witnesses. One was actually a circuit court clerk who witnessed the whole thing and was like the best positioned person to witness this happening. We got very heavy very fast. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to do this. I will lighten up in a minute. I am okay. But reading his record of the other experience was fascinating to me, because I was like, it did happen and that happened. And I needed someone to tell me my experience exactly as it happened. And that's a line in this poem, actually. Because when you have an intimate experience around sexual violence and it's you and somebody else, then you do doubt and discount yourself. And it's murky and it's grey, and it does discount my own memory. And, you know, it was a very different time, even 20 years ago, around things like consent and engagement and sex as a thing that we never discussed. You know, a writer friend of mine said, it was a couple of cans of Carling and a sort of a good look, you know. And she meant that very, you know, nicely, but we, you know, and that kind of discussion around that. So I did really want to write a piece about this. And when you wrote about it, if people have read the poetry in that first section with the cantos, is a lot of the use of the strike through. So you have words that, it's a form of kind of erasure in a way, but visible erasure, where you're like, okay, I have these words on the page, which is often I am sorry in the cantos, and there's a strike through there, a line through them. So as a reader, you're wondering, okay, this is there, this has been said, this has been thought, but you no longer think it, or you want to erase it. Can you talk about using that and how that plays into what you're talking about there, the necessity to tell your story, but also physically using those strike throughs as well? Yeah, well, so as a form, I suppose I used it with respect to that whole tick that a lot of people have with we start conversations with I'm sorry, particularly conversations around trauma. Actually, just I can go about my day and apologise a lot for being in somebody's way. I'm really sorry. I'm about to voice something here that might make you unhappy, you know. And we're kind of conditioned that way to say I'm going to tell a story now that happened to me, but because I'm the messenger, you'll shoot me because I'm the messenger. And I found that a lot with, you know, I talk a lot about institutional abuse in my work as well, and I find that a lot, that people get very angry with the person bringing the actual clear message, not the perpetrators of the crime at all. Which is some sort of fascinating disconnect or dissociation that people have. You know, people get angry with someone telling the story. And it's like a real reaction to the person Because if that can happen, I have really gone to town with asking if that can happen to you, then maybe it can happen to them, and that's why they get so defensive about it. I'm not sure. But anyway, with the I'm sorry's, I suppose I tried to re-own my voice in that piece with respect to I am sorry, I got up, I'm sorry, you know, I wore lipstick, all the cliches, and just take them out. But they're still there.
Yeah.
You know, but you're trying always, man, like there'll be people in this room on this journey too, with respect to you're trying to stop the habit, because it's not always a great habit.
Yeah, and it's really powerful to see it, because I think as a reader, you start interrogating your own relationship to the word sorry, particularly in that situation. And there's a huge power in what you're doing, which is telling your own story, how you want it told. And that's particularly important for women, particularly in Irish society. But that's a lot of pressure on women. Like, do you feel with female poets there is that pressure to like excavate tough things in their life and give it out to the audience, and that's a particular thing that's particular to female poets? Or am I putting a lot of pressure on female poets by saying that?
Well, there certainly is a pressure, I feel. That could be an intrinsic sort of internalized pressure for me, that I wanted to say something with poetry, and that I was influenced by political poetry, particularly American poetry, much more so than I would have been by the Irish lyric form, because it didn't hold anything for me that I could relate to. So I was more interested in the American form. Is there a pressure? I think there possibly is a pressure, given the historic situation of where we're writing now. You know, we were just talking about this on the way over with regards to what's just after unfolding, even in the last 2 weeks in Ireland. We kind of felt we knew it all, and now we're hearing it again. And the radio waves have been full of the trauma and the stories, and I suppose maybe as an artist you're trying to find a way to voice that and maybe hold a record of it and witness it in some ways, you know. But yeah, there probably is a pressure, because of course everything is cyclical, so you're so worried about the progressive leaps we've taken as a nation with regards to the referendums in the last decade have been huge, and giant steps have been made. We're an incredibly progressive country with regards to our social sensibility. I think there's a real kindness in us at a community level. Yeah. But I'm always worried about the fact that everything is cyclical and we can go back and revert just as quick. Look at Roe versus Wade in the States. Yeah. We can go back very quickly. So I suppose I said that to a friend of mine, a poet, Sarah Clancy. I said, I'm exhausted. Yeah. Just exhausted. And she said, well, what did you expect? You pushed the boulder up the hill to take it down. I was like, yay.
Oh, gosh.
And you drink a lot of wine in between. But it was that whole idea that you have a microphone and you're talking and you have to, I don't know. But I suppose there is definitely the considerations to be made about what is art and what is history and where do they meet. And they definitely meet in my work, even in How to Build a Boat. I think I'm very cognizant of the social setting of my work.
Yeah, it's so present. It's so present in your work. And, when you're talking there, I'm thinking too, the value of just writing down experience. Like if something isn't written down, if it isn't captured in some way, then somebody can turn around and say, well, that thing didn't happen, or that, so it's like that value of having it actually, in print or written. Yeah, recorded.
Well, I also think as well, there's a real beauty in silence too. And I feel that we as a country started to talk very openly about things that we had not discussed for decades. And like I said, I go back to the radio. People used to ring into radio stations around repeal and around the institutional abuse and tell their most intimate story on the radio to a broadcaster. And I used to think about when the phone was hung up and they're in the kitchen and they've just exposed the deepest, most intimate parts. They may have never spoken about that before. And I often felt that must have been a huge weight on them, and that might have, that could have been very difficult. I can imagine the aftermath of that. Yeah. And sometimes I think it's okay to hold your whisht. I think it is. You don't owe everybody your story. Yeah. And that's important as well. It's that balance, isn't it? And if you want to keep it, there are parts of people that they want to conceal forever, and I think that that's very valid as well. So, it's that sort of balance. But you're absolutely right. The beauty of fiction, I work in a university and I work with a history department, and I obviously work in the English department as a lecturer, but I work with the True Moral History Project with the history department. And of course, the onus on the history department is constantly sources. And I run back to the creative writing department going, it doesn't matter, it's fiction. And there's a great freedom in that, because I know at a visceral level the stories my grandmothers told me. I know the stories of my people, the story of the story of the story. I know what they felt, and I don't have to defend it when I write it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, completely.
You know, and I think everybody does. We all speak to each other in story in this country. We tell full stories.
Yeah.
More stories and less sources for me.
Forget those primary sources. Because you grew up in a family where storytelling was, like, the oral tradition was very important. Do you kind of remember being young and hearing people telling stories around the kitchen table?
Oh, I mean, that we didn't grow out of that habit.
You still do it.
My son's girlfriend is an only child, and she came over last Christmas or the Christmas before to my house, and my brothers were all there, my sister, and it was packed with people, and my brother stood up at the fireplace and started telling a story, and she was like, what is happening? And he went on for 20 minutes, and we were all like so enraptured in him, and she was so panicked. And she was like, this is so bizarre. And I was like, what? And I said, no, someone will best him, it's fine. So someone else gets up and tells a story, but he's actually the best storyteller, but he hates when I talk about him telling stories. So I shouldn't. But yeah, people will, and they'll tell stories and they'll embellish them, and it's wonderful. Like, it really is. And she was like, do I have to do that? And I was like, no, you don't have to do that. She's like, phew. But actually, it is. I find it sad because my younger son has started kind of getting involved in stands up, but he just doesn't have it fully yet. But the older guy's like, no thanks, I don't know what you're talking about.
Really? It's rejecting the tradition.
And they also say you're using words that none of us have ever heard before. And it's the Hiberno farm, west of Ireland shtick that, like, I just think is just the way people speak. And my kids are like, what? Nobody talks like that.
Wow. So you're preserving the language by doing that kind of.
I think it's going to die with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
No pressure, Elaine, but like somebody's going to record the stories that you're going to be telling. And so to go to How to Build a Boat, when did you meet Jamie? Like, did you meet Jamie in your head or on the page?
No, in my head. Jamie was annoying me for a long time, and maybe if anyone has read it, he's also annoyed them slightly. I love Jamie, but he's a very irritating but wonderful young man. And Jamie was around the same time as You Were, and it's funny, the new novel was around the same time as everything crosses over for me. I'm very interested in kind of like the Venn diagrams and obviously maths, if anyone has read it. But Jamie's voice was really strong. Even though it was a very visual book for me, As You Are was a very oral, auditory, cacophonous type of thing. But How to Build a Boat, but it was like, did you know that, Elaine? You do know that, Elaine? Did you know that, Elaine? I was like, oh my God, stop talking to me. And it's voices in my head, and I have these auditory hallucinations all the time that I thought were totally normal. But when you grow up in a farm in the west of Ireland, you have to make your own fun, you know. It was a long way to town. And so I did, and I really did, and I had loads of friends that weren't real. And he kept saying, did you know that? And he'd be saying, you know, did you know that the butterfly can blah, blah, blah. And it was that, he was that pressing, his voice was that strong.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was around for a while.
And then how did you construct the world around him and Tess and Tig? Like, how did they come in? Were you know, writing his perspective or his story, and then these characters just had to come in, or was it more deliberate than that?
There was always a teacher. Marianne Mirzakhani was always the Iranian mathematician. She was always the scaffold.
And she features, she's an inspiration.
Yeah, but her... I won't get into it, it's very boring for early morning, but her paper on geodesics and hyperbolic surfaces was a very...
Gonna quiz you on all of that in a minute.
Was a catalyst for the patterning. So she had this... She won the Fields Medal and died quite tragically, and was a genius. And she used to explain it. I know very little except watching her, and I'm a bit like Jamie, but she used to explain it that you'd stuff the pockets of a billiards table, you let the balls go, and the trajectories that they make, and she used that as a sort of a way of getting into the practical thing of what she did. And I just thought about that for a minute, and I used to watch, and I used to do it. They won't keep going forever. There's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. It belies physics. But the idea of balls just going and clashing into each other and being stuck on this table, I got fixated with this with Jamie's voice. And so Tess came very quickly. I had 2 balls, and I thought, what if 2 strangers? I'm so interested in the meetings of strangers. And I'm not so interested in the family dynamics for novels, but I am in the 3rd one, so sorry I went there. But I was interested in what 2 strangers could do if they clashed, because I thought of the billiards table like the strictures of Emery as a town, and how people are stuck in these towns. Not stuck, they live in them, but you're stuck in a hierarchical pyramid that you're not always fully aware of, but you know it's there.
Yeah.
Regional town. I grew up in this kind of space. You know who sat at the front seat at Mass when I was growing up and who sat at the back? We were at the back, and I know who sat at the front seat. Well, I'll tell you, actually, it was the college lecturer and the doctors and the front seat.
Okay.
They're both passed on now, God rest them. So that's fine, I can tell the story. But it was just that idea of who was in the top positions. So I wanted to have these two balls, and what were all the other balls doing at the same time, and how did they make their patterns, and how did they go about their day? So that's how I saw it. So Tess and Jamie leave at the exact same time, on the exact same day, to start with the same sort of level of anxiety that you'd imagine would propel with kinetic energy to both. Now, there you go. I bet no one here that read it. Like, a guy said to me after Edinburgh, I need to read the book all over again. I missed it all. I said, I kind of miss a lot as well. It's fine.
I love that, though, the kind of unfurling of like the levels of the book. And there's a lot of grief in it. And it's interesting because some people are... Well, actually, there's a lot of grief in it, and people might not always... I was going to say some people are aware of their grief, and they are, but a lot of people in the book aren't necessarily aware of their grief. So, like, Jamie's lost his mother, but he's never met her. So... his grief is something that maybe he doesn't even understand, because we assume you have to have met somebody to feel grief. And yet Tess is feeling grief for the life that she thought she was going to have, that she's not going to have within her relationship and within parenthood. And so tell me about that, about trying to explore those different levels of grief that are maybe not really discussed types of grief. They're not the most obvious types of grief. And yes, they're common and they're out there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a book about loneliness and about how we can be so lonely and live among people. And I know it's a cliche, but I think cliches are cliches for a reason often. I worked in a school for 20 years, in a Catholic school, because it was the only type in the town. So don't judge me. They're very common around this country. Yeah. So it was that idea that I worked in this school for years, and the enormous weight of grief among people, because of course you're working in a community, they're communities. And anyone here who works in one will know that. And the battles that some of your students have faced to sit in front of you on a daily basis often overwhelmed me, particularly where there was a loss of a mother.
Yeah.
I found that really, really difficult, actually, that they had to get up and get on with it, because there is that attitude. I worked with staff members, and of course I've lost people myself as well, so it was coming from my own grief, and that idea that it's such a front-facing job as well. So for teachers that had tremendous loss, I worked with someone who'd lost 2 of her children, and they had to turn up on a daily basis and be alert and aware and care for others when they're going through such turmoil themselves. And it's that idea of switching on and switching off.
Yeah.
And you wonder when you're on and when you're off. I thought, they're difficult environments to go into when you're full of grief and loss. So I probably wanted to interrogate that as well. And actually, in that way that we don't always discuss it directly, if that makes sense. It's just a sense over these people. Jamie's loss of his mum is interesting for a few different reasons, I suppose. His father obviously has all the hallmarks of natural and normal grief of losing his partner when she was young, and has dealt with it, I suppose, in the way that we see many people dealing with it. Jamie never met his mother, so everyone around him is aware of this loss.
Yeah.
And no one is talking to him about it.
Yeah.
So nobody is talking about his mother because of the circumstances. She was very young. And so he's trying to fill what he imagines his mother would be like, but not in an overly emotive way, in a very practical, I'm interested in this woman. I'm going to find a woman who might fit her bill. Yeah. So he goes to Tess for that reason, and he goes to Mirzakhani, and every woman he comes across, he's really interested in them. Would she be like my mother? Yeah. And then, of course, Jordan Peterson appears to tell him, stay away from all women. Jesus.
Yes, as he is wanted to do, and the idea then within that of Jamie constructing this perpetual motion machine, it's like this quest that can never be fulfilled, and like the reader knows that it can't be fulfilled, and yet you kind of hope that it can. Like I was reading it, being like, maybe there'll be a magical realism, or maybe something happen. Tell me about that idea of that thread of like, he's so determined to do this thing that everybody kind of knows, or he knows won't work, and yet he hopes that it will work in some way.
Yeah, so he thinks, because he has only one clip of his mother ever seen it, this kind of grainy clip of her. She was an amazing swimmer, and he has her in motion, and that's all he has. So he thinks that if he builds a perpetual motion machine where it's constantly energized, that he'll feel something of the energy of what she might have felt. But of course he can't do it. But he's so precocious, he's going to do it. And I love the fact that he's just very sort of, I'm going to do this and stay out of my way. And I love that. And you see so many students over your career that come in with a dream and we kill it very quickly. We really do, actually. Yeah. We expect them to sit down, face the front, chalk and talk, dream, but dream later. You took colours out in primary school, but right now it's over. That's it. And and what are we doing with that to people? Yeah. And the dreams are wild and mad, but a few of them will make it. Yeah. And you never know who they're going to be. And I am really interested in the characters that come in with knowledge about everything. Every single thing catches their attention. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little bit like that, you see. So I'm like, oh, this and this and this. And if we put it all together, it's going to create something amazing, or it's going to be a failure. Yeah. A guy told me recently about protein in flies, that he really wanted to harvest the protein in flies because protein was big. Young people are doing nothing but eating protein bars and blah, 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 blah. And I was sitting looking at him going, you are a genius or you are not a genius, and I'm not sure which. Well, but I thought, go for it. And he was trying to, I shouldn't probably give away his idea. I think it's been foiled by finance or something. But I was really fascinated by the conversation. And I just thought to myself, this is amazing. And there is that line, and there's that line with Jamie. He's unreliable. I don't know where Jamie is now.
Okay, right.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Like a character like Jamie could be anywhere, and that's the great tragedy of a character like Jamie as well, I think.
And he's within the structure of his school, and that's a huge thing as well in terms of the type of school he goes to, what the rules and regulations are in the school, which goes back to issues of patronage, which is something that you feel particularly strongly about. Can you tell us about building that world around him and trying to reflect the kind of social situation and church situation within the educational world that he's in, and how that reflects issues in Ireland really today?
Yeah, I suppose I could start that with saying I was really interested in people who said, this is like a book from the 1950s. I hope this isn't real. I'm not going to say whether it's real or not. Yeah. But I am really interested in that idea of a child like Jamie who is singular, going into a situation where, you go into these situations and you're supposed to have this social nous where you can understand how to be flexible. And I'm fascinated, I was fascinated by the school environment I taught in. They went from religion into science, where they're expected to learn about evolution. They've come from creationism. Then they come into me and I'm telling them about Sylvia Plath, and then they're very confused. Then they go out to PE and someone is telling them to, come on, madam, beat him, blah, blah, blah. And they're going from all these different, and most people, not some, are able to manage those worlds and realise, I'll take this. Yeah. That's a story. That's that. I'm good at this. That teacher is nuts. That teacher is brilliant, blah, blah, blah. They were never nuts where I taught. They were all amazing. But just, in other schools. So I thought to myself, how fascinating it is that at that age, 13, 14, people begin to become flexible. And they have persona. And they kind of hone that persona. I never knew that, you don't say the quiet bit out loud, as you probably realise. That was just something that I never really came to terms with. So Jamie is that kind of kid. So he's going into this school where they're telling him all these things about how to be a man, how to be a man. The religion is off the charts with regards to how important it is to the school situation. And he's just no, that you're wrong. And I am fascinated by you put an immovable object into this space. Yeah. He's speaking truth to power, but he's doing it accidentally. They are some of the most powerful people that the world has, I think. Those voices that just keep going, them, they come over at Christmas. And you're like, oh no, the dinner table, oh God. Yeah. And they're not saying anything wrong, but they're just saying it directly, Yeah. But they are some of the brightest lights in situations. Mm-hmm. They can, so I was interested in that type of a person in these schools that are so regimented. Yeah, and one size fits all type thing. Yeah.
And there's a sense of protection as well around somebody who's the one who's speaking truth to power, especially if they, like Jamie, don't realise that's what they're doing. The sense you're like, oh no, do you realise that what you're getting into here?
and to interrogate what that conversation might look like. So
Yeah.
you're saying, well, do you realise what you're doing here? And he's saying, I'm telling the truth. And for my whole life, I've been told to tell the truth. Weren't we all told to tell the truth as kids?
Yeah.
And then you suddenly become a teenager and you're trying to kind of manipulate the truth to not hurt people.
Yeah.
And then, is the truth over? And so it's an interrogation of what it is to tell the truth in those spaces and to call it out. It's like The Emperor's New Clothes. And I know that has also become a bit of a cliche. But that book, when I was a child, to me, was one of my favourite books, and I have it on my desk.
Oh, wow.
And I just love that book where he parades through the town with his backside out and the kid points and says he has no clothes on. Well, Jamie is very much that kid in that moment.
Yeah, and it's always such a kind of a story and even an archetype, is that the right word? That it just can apply to, it still applies to absolutely so many situations.
American politics.
Yes. And just, when we talk about how to build a boat, I mean, it happened to be longlisted for, I don't know if you've heard of the Booker Prize, one of the most prestigious literary awards. Tell us about when you found out about the longlisting for the Booker.
Yeah, you have a little bit of time before everybody knows, and in those moments you think you're amazing. And then everyone knows, and then you realise it's funny. Well, actually, I have to say, what I did was I actually opened the book. I shouldn't tell this out loud, but I actually opened the book to see was it okay? I went through it, and then I had to close it really quickly because I just find after I finish a book I'm very disconnected from it, and I just wanted to go away.
Yeah.
I was very glad for the characters, genuinely.
Okay.
I was very glad for the characters. I was so happy for Jamie, and I was really, really happy that the West of Ireland had this sort of platform that really did kind of make me happy. But I mean, prizes are so incredibly subjective, and art has to be about something else, I think. But look, I'm always trying to balance it. I'm incredibly grateful, but there are loads of the most amazing writers in the whole world that I adore that have never been longlisted for the Booker. But I suppose it was a really, 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 really nice boost for the work. Yeah. I don't know. I'll stop now.
It must be hard.
Well done, Jamie.
Yeah, well done, Jamie. I mean, it's interesting because when you think something isn't going to happen to you and it seems like something that's out there, it has this absolutely huge value and it becomes this massive thing. And then when you get access to it, sometimes your viewpoint on it can change because all of a sudden you're inside that world. Did that kind of happen to you where you kind of felt like, oh, wow, it sounds like you kind of had some interesting thoughts about the whole process?
I think I have a line in this book, or maybe it's in my other one, I don't know, everything's merging at this stage. I'm doing edits of a book, I'm exhausted, sorry. I take good and bad news the exact same way.
Really?
I always have. I've always gone, no.
Are you afraid of good news in a way?
Well, I don't like it. People never believe this, but I really don't like the spotlight.
Okay. Turn down the lights there.
My friends just laugh. My husband goes, oh, yeah, ridiculous. I don't genuinely.
Okay.
I don't know. I love working on a book on my own, in the kitchen, just the characters, me, that space.
Yeah.
So I suppose the rest of it is for other people, I think.
Yeah.
But it didn't change my view. As I said, I was very grateful, but shock to me, and I think it's to anyone, shock is shock, and so it was just like, oh my God, this is a bit too big for me right now. But I think it all turned out well.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to have been nominated, and it was really nice then to be able to go on and continue writing the next book without having, Anyway, very grateful, amazing, thank you.
And so after you find out that you've been longlisted for the Booker, like you said, there's a little bit of time, you get to know, then it goes public. And what's for us in the room, what happens next after that? Are you just doing loads of media? People like me ringing you up?
Sebastian and Paul and Paula in green rooms, which was kind of fun. I have to say, it was really nice.
Yeah.
That was really nice because there were four of us, and it just felt really collegial and lovely, and I genuinely mean this, hand on my heart. I was thrilled for Paul and Paul, but I was really sad for Sebastian.
Yeah.
Sebastian Barry is amazing, and he's an amazing soul, and he sent me the most fabulous email on the day that we both knew we weren't going any further.
Aww.
I was absolutely one of the most beautiful things I ever read.
Oh.
I'm a bit teary thinking about it.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah, and I would wallpaper it on my bathroom maybe, but it was really beautiful, and it was really beautiful about my writing.
Okay.
Not about the prize.
I get you. Yeah. The attention was on.
Which was incredibly magnanimous of him in that moment.
Yeah.
And to bother with the younger, the next generation. So, I have to say that there's a lot of love in this in this
Yeah.
industry. And there's a lot of not love as well. Like, but, you know, but at the core of the writers, that was really nice. And what writing meant and what it means to be writing and what my writing meant to him and vice versa. And yeah.
So thoughtful. And it was such a massive moment when Ireland realised there was 4 Irish writers on the long list. Like, it just felt like, what a huge moment. This is amazing. You know, so many think pieces about why there was 4 Irish writers.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, what you thought that moment meant for Irish literature.
Well, of course, that question came up all the time. Why is Irish writing so good? And someone just had this conversation with me over breakfast. And it's a very difficult thing to answer that, because you just feel, oh God, I don't know. You know, maybe that's for the critics, I suppose. It goes back to that thing, that idea. I did try to cobble together some answer. I think for me, it goes back to the orality of the storytelling and the idea of telling stories rather than having actual honest conversations. You know, family are communicating through these stories. I also think it has something to do with post-colonialism and language, and the way we use language and we manipulate it. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Boucicault, the playwright, Dion Boucicault, but the Chakran, but that play with regards to kind of the slippery way that we used language for generations, you know, one-upmanship and so on. There's a great poetry in that, and you know the way we don't always say what we mean, and I think that we do that. There's a legacy of that. That's historic. Not saying directly what you mean, because you don't know if you're going to be penalised for that. Like, you know, that must be in us somewhere. So you're trying to say things in loads of different ways as well, you know. And then there was a lot talked about the supports for Irish writing and the Arts Council, and I've travelled a lot in other countries with my writing, and they rely on philanthropy and so on, and I was really surprised, because I did think we do have government supports for writing and for the arts, and they're not without their flaws, but it is a wonderful thing that it is supported in that way. And I really think that we value literature and the arts in Ireland. I think it's a really, people read, readers are wonderful, book clubs, libraries. I was in Ardkeen, is it Ardkeen in Waterford? The most amazing session in that library with people who come in on a really, really hot day baking, and they loved reading. And it was brilliant, you know. So I do think that we are a country of readers and writers, and everybody writes.
People are willing to get up early in the morning to go listen to others talk.
Genuinely, and I often wonder why that is, but you know, maybe there's a magic to it that we don't need to try, and maybe we should just not tell them.
Not analyse it so much.
Do you know what? We're great crack.
Yeah.
We are actually, and you know, we have conversations with strangers. We will have chats with people. You know, on a day that if I work full time, so I'm not stuck at a desk all the time, but you know, the odd day you'd be feeling kind of low, and you just go to the shop. And you just have the best time in Tesco. I had the best time with a guy from York who was packing lemons recently, and we were about 40 minutes talking about football. And I just thought to myself, just getting up and out, and we do talk to each other all the time, I think.
Yeah, we do love a story.
We don't like the silence. Silence makes us very uncomfortable.
Big time. We're definitely in the company of people who there would be no silence in this room. And I mean, you know, the idea as well, I suppose, of making a living as a writer in Ireland. I feel like there can be this idea of you know, authors like yourself sitting down and being able to just write all day, having no other job, and that it's really possible to just do that, and that's what you're doing. Now, for some people, perhaps it is possible, but they're in the tiny minority. What's the reality of making a living and being an author in Ireland today?
So I wake and someone brings me my newspaper and my pipe. My husband leaves my slippers out. I just put my feet into them. I say, no children this morning, darling. I am inspired. We'll have a seance. And I put on a tweed jacket and I sit at my desk.
Lovely.
No, I don't. I do exactly what everybody else does. I get up and I go to work, and I was doing my edits, and you know that Pomodoro technique thing, 20 minutes on, 10 minutes off. So the 20 minutes, or the 20 minutes, and then the 10 minutes washing clothes, I swear to God, the dryer, defrosting stuff, blah, 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 and then back to it. That was a lovely break. And then 10 minutes, clothes out of the dryer, blah, blah, blah. So, and it's very romantic. And you want to see the state of me, top notch, pajamas.
The glamour, yeah.
Not glamorous at all. So, like, it's just that, like, it depends on how badly you want it. I don't have a process with respect to time. I'll have to write today.
Yeah.
I'm on a deadline because I have to, because I work. I like work, though. You know, I really... You get up, you get out, you meet people. It's really good for you, you know, for me anyway, for my process. And so I'll write anywhere, absolutely anywhere. A plane, a train, an automobile, a toilet. It doesn't have to be fancy. I just need my laptop. I leave myself a good set of notes when I finish up a section. And I'll say, Aoife is going to put on her Doc Martens and she's going to stride up Kilmarkeen. She's going to go for a glass of Sauvignon Blanc tomorrow. So, you know, that's what you're doing. So I will leave that. That's where I left it so that I will be able to just get straight back into it, you know. And my son says, I'm just completely out of it. And I said, I've learned to zone you out because I work in the kitchen and they pass through with pot noodle and people and their woes and the dog and the cat and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you just have to. And, you know, there's no mystery to it. Anyone that's a writer here will know that. There's no... Sit your ass down on a chair and just put words in front of words in front of words in front of words or after them, not in front of them. That's not right. That's Leonardo da Vinci. Some moments I'm very inspired, I'll write backwards.
Maybe they're messing with the form. Put the words, And
then I open it in front of a mirror and I make it all very difficult for myself. Put them after the words and just do it. Just do it. I'm like a nightcap. Well, as my mother said to me, if you want to do it, just do it, but stop going on about it.
That is, I need to take that advice.
And she was always like that. Had you finished it? It's taken you an awful lot longer than I thought it would. And I'll tell you, that voice keeps you between that voice and my agent's voice. He's not unlike my mother telling me, is it not ready yet? And I just like, okay, I'm coming on. And like, that's the mystery. You know, just do the thing. Sorry. I went way off, did I?
No, not at all. I was going to ask what the long listing for the Booker then means for that. Like, did you feel, okay, I got long listed, the next book has to be Starving Work of Heartbreaking Genius, or did you feel that pressure or not?
For about 5 minutes, and I honestly mean this genuinely. My characters are the best people in my life always. I manipulate them, I control them. It's who I want to be in real life, but my family push back against it all the time. And they told me to live among people, I have to allow them their own autonomy. So I'm like, okay, well, I can manipulate my characters. When I am with my characters, nothing matters genuinely, except their trajectory, how real they are, how real the scene is, the setting, the house, the smells, the aesthetic. I just live in it. I'm living in one now, and I love going back into it. I'm just reassured in it. Wow. Yeah.
Does it feel very real to you, like another dimension? Kind of?
They're real, but they're real until it's really published. Although Margaret Rose from As You Were, if anyone's read that, she lives with me all the time. Yeah. She's another voice telling me to come on and hurry up.
Wow.
Yeah. But she's a real strong matriarch.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's
not unlike my granny, you see. So that's just the voice of my granny coming back to haunt me.
See, we have those little voices in our heads. And I mean...
We do, actually. But that is really interesting, the voices in your head. I asked students that this week. I said, who's the voice in your head? And they're all looking at me. And I said, please tell me you have critical voices in your head or else I'm all alone in this world. and they were, and I hate to say it, the mammies appeared a few times.
Really? Oh,
yeah, but that's kind of just for them to go and get vitamin C and clean themselves and stuff, so that's okay. But you know, it's like, who is that voice? And are they real? And what are they saying to you? And is it helping you, your process? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is a time where you have to kind of go on by yourself. She says, with like all the characters in her head helping her to live.
And I know you probably can't say too much about the next book, but is there anything that you're able to let us in on when it comes to...
Yeah, I think it's definitely, for me, my most ambitious. There's 3 timelines. It's based around a woman who in the west of Ireland who spent some time in London and she moves back. And an ex of hers from London moves back. She's Irish, she's English. He moves back to live close by to write a book on extreme sports guys. That's not really part of it, but I'm fascinated by extreme sports people like that put other people's lives at risk. I mean, I had to put that into a book. Anyway, she's had death and she's interrogating why she's back in her family house. So she's coming across a lot of memories and a lot is revealed and opened up about intergenerational trauma. But she also becomes obsessed with the trad wife movement in the States.
Wow.
So she feels that, like, to be a successful woman, maybe she'll copy them for a little while.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a whole other world. I went full on mad when I did that. I once made a lemon meringue pie and a chicken, something fancy with these, I don't know what the potatoes were, the ones in squares, fondant.
Oh, okay.
My husband thought
The layered.
he had died and gone to heaven. I said,
my
this
gosh.
is research, it's ending next week. But I could see the kind of the addiction. I could really with the are you familiar with Tradwives? It's been fascinating. No, it's not the main part. She just becomes fascinated. She goes back into the history of the women, her granny and stuff, and it all culminates in a dinner party scene that's kind of Chekhovian. Like I was obsessed with Chekhov writing this, but the dinner party scene was great crack because of West of Ireland dinner party scene. I'm not sure it's ever been done. And I just thought, let's bring the bourgeoisie to us, Elaine.
Okay.
And I thought, yeah, well, I don't know, will we have Galty cheese? How's this going to play out? Will we kill a cow, put it in the deep freeze, and, will I milk? Like, I grew up with this kind of stuff. Anyway, the Tradwives stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, stop.
Did you go on the TikTok?
I did
the TikTok. Sorry, sound like somebody who's never heard of the internet. Did you go on TikTok? Did you go on the TikTok, Elaine? Did you go on TikTok, Instagram?
Wait, yeah. I went on the TikTok through the Instagram like a boomer.
I wrote a book about social media and I can't even describe the things.
I really loved your book about social media, genuinely, but it terrifies me. So I did go on the TikTok through the Instagram. My kids thought it was hilarious. I was like, this woman is the pinkest woman I've ever seen. The pink. Everything was pink. Both the children were all pink and blonde and steps of the stairs. Her husband was amazing, buff, amazing. There was loads of them. God bless them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Did you feel like, I felt like looking at the, sorry, we're going off another journey, but
no,
I feel like it's so fascinating and disturbing way.
They're preppers. And I could really fall into prepping for doomsday. Like I could a little bit, but I don't because I watched The Jungle Book and I know that storing is not fair.
Okay.
And that's what has the world in the shit show it's in. So this is also a commentary on the way we are so greedy, but it's not meant to be. I just realised that now. But it is that, did you ever watch it? Like, I don't know if anyone watches these TikToks through Instagram of the mothers making bears out of luncheon roll for their children with fucking cherries here and something else. Sorry now for cursing, but it's like, I could barely put the sandwiches in the tin foil. I mean that. Like, and I thought I was at it. And they don't even leave the oranges in the net. They take them out. They have an orange thing to dispense, and they have biscuits. And oh Lord, do you remember that domestic science book from the 60s that told you to put a bow in your hair and greet your husband with a smile? And if the washing machine was broken, did I imagine this? Don't tell him about it till he's handed.
Oh, we can't trouble him because he's been busy working all day. Like why would you? Yeah.
And it was like, I just thought that was the funniest thing ever. And we're right back there. Let's go back the cyclical stuff of what I said at the beginning of this. Back to that cycle. I thought that day was gone. I thought we had moved. People died and continued for people to have agency and autonomy. And then I suppose, am I a bad feminist for not allowing them to live the way they want to live? Maybe.
It's so naughty, isn't it? Well, I still think it's bad, but it's still naughty.
Well, I find when I write fiction, then what happens to me is I do actually start to have empathy.
Okay, yeah.
That was the same with Peterson, Never Tell Him. Once I started reading his work and watching him online, I was like, this man needs a tissue and a hug.
Yeah, because you saw him as human, I suppose.
I went in to go Peterson, and then the more I watched it, the more I understood maybe why the boys were connected to him. And that was similar with the Tradwife thing. I was like, I find this interesting, and maybe I've it all wrong, genuinely. Wait till you see me in a year, if you won't know me.
We'll all keep an eye out if you see Elaine wandering around with a penny on and offering plates of just have a word.
And Ray will be going around whistling. My husband's a Wexford man, actually. I think he'd be all right for a while and then he'd die. He wouldn't, I don't think. I hope not.
Yeah, no, I don't think. Yeah, not at all. It feels like the Tradwife stuff is a form of escape in a way from a world that's it's like we've gotten so much, and yet a lot of things are very difficult, and for some people it's returning back to the kind of
I think it's control as well. I do. I think it's control and your place in a space. Where is my place here? We've moved so much from our mother's generation. We're a generation that just jumped, thankfully, to free education, and I got a full grant to go to university. It was a point system, so it was as egalitarian as it could be, I suppose. It's not a perfect system at all, and it's worse now, I feel. But my mother didn't have that opportunity. Her mother didn't have that opportunity. So they were the homemakers. And that was very important because that was their role in society. So I would never demean that situation with respect to how important that was to my mother. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
It wouldn't be for me. And I just, but some people, and they do a very, like, I do wonder about, did we throw the baby out with the bathwater in a way when we're all running around in cars like headless chickens to get people.
Trying to have it all, I suppose. But it's that idea.
To get people to gymnastics who will never ever be gymnasts. Or whatever you're bringing into. Let's go to classical guitar, darling.
I look forward to seeing how you explore that, because I feel like fiction gives us as readers an ability to either maybe feel empathy towards people that would not normally, or just to see into their world, and for us as writers, viewers, writer, to explore how you feel about a topic through an individual that's involved in it. And it's such a, rather than just having an opinion, you kind of insert yourself into the world a bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I'm laughing in jest, but I'm not like. People are scrolling constantly on the internet. I am fascinated by that. I called it, as you are, the Vanta black hole of the internet. That's sort of the darkest dark, and you get into it. And the issue with it is, it's such a mind mess if you think about what we're scrolling. So you're scrolling the worst of humanity that's coming out of Gaza, the best of humanity as well, but the worst of tragedy that's coming out. You're watching this, and then you do scroll on to somebody putting things into pots and pans and whatever. And there's a reassurance in it then, because you're like, so you're kind of, and you're getting this constantly. Our brains are not able for that level of...
to process all of that. Yeah,
and you do have to wonder what's happening. But it is incredibly addictive, because we're very tired, and it's very easy to do that rather than do something else. Read, actually. Reading can take a lot of concentration. You scroll and, suddenly you have 2 hours of your life wasted, but you've actually gone through some of the most disturbing material. I've come off Instagram pretty much fully now, and I've deleted my Twitter about a year ago, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Really? Do you feel like it kind of freed up space in your brain that then maybe some creative space could take over?
Like looking outside and picking blackberries and all that stuff that, I'm not into mindfulness. I'm into just do whatever you want, well, within reason, there are no crimes in place. But you know what I mean? Mindfulness is another job. Everything is, they just seem to be giving us everything as a freaking job.
Yeah, it's so true.
Take space, jump in the sea swimming. I swam in the sea when we were kids because it was free. We lived beside it. There was no fancy. It was just... go in for a swim and don't come out till you're all nearly dead of the cold. And now I wild sea swim now with my friends, and we just paddle around and talk, and we do nothing really exciting in it. But that sort of whole idea, that's another thing. Everything has become...
It's like professionalising your hobbies or,
Well, absolutely, and it goes back to how to build a boat with respect to the curragh, that idea of people, coming together, which is fantastic to make all these... I'm really interested in the crafts of hands, because I come from a long line of people who made things with their hands. They're living, mostly, with their hands, and how I became, I suppose, the academic, and my siblings, with respect to now we're in our heads, it's all cerebral, and what has happened to our hands. Because they are touchy to do things, bake things, make things. And we lost a lot in that time, I feel. So the curragh was really important in how to build a boat, because people actually made their livelihoods from it. They weren't just making it because they had spare time and they loved the idea of a mehel, or making, what was that bread everyone was making? Sourdough. I don't like that, but make some scones or something. But anyway, sourdough was big, banana bread was big. I get that one because the bananas go off. But with the boat, like, it was that idea of, it's all been almost capitalised as well.
Everything.
And you're like, they made the curraghs. When I went to research how to make a curragh, it was fascinating. That's an oral tradition. There's not a whole lot of books on that, because people made things with their hands intuitively. They were able to be intuitive. They trusted their gut. This will float, this won't. They knew, they'd watched grandparents and so on. They didn't have blueprints. They didn't have TikTok. They didn't have, they trusted their instinct. And I feel that we have started to not trust our instinct on things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. We're kind of waiting for other people to reassure us that we're doing, everything we're doing is okay. You're meditating for enough minutes here.
And Jamie has become that. He wants the blueprint. He wants the pattern for the boat. And Tig is like, just feel it. And he's like, you're actually mad. And that's a real clash, because I's from the island, from the Aran Islands. That's a real clash of somebody wanting the academic, you know, and I suppose I'm interested in that, working in an academic environment. I'm like, you know, some people can just do stuff without it being written down and without this big palaver about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
the instinctual.
the kind of balance between that. But I do feel that, and if anyone in their family that has a skill, my grandfather was a great thatcher. We don't have a clue. I never learned. He used to stitch leather because we had horses, and I do know how to milk a cow. That might come in useful if I'm on Survivor. But it was that thing that I didn't want to know about those things, because of shame, I suppose. You know, you don't want to know about those things because you can buy them in shops now.
Yes, progress often means
Well, yeah, but it wasn't actually. What it was just like capitalism.
Absolutely. Oh my God, we could do another 400 hours talking about this fascinating topic, but we have to go to questions. But I think if anybody can take something out of what you're saying there, it really is to maybe reconnect with that kind of history and the tactileness.
And if you make sourdough bread, I'm fine. It's fine.
Don't post it to Elaine. So we've time for a couple of questions. So there's a roving mic, so if people want to pop up their hands if they've anything to ask Elaine. Don't be shy.
Or anything at all.
Jamie is autistic, though, isn't he?
So,
I know you have to use the word.
yeah. So I don't label any characters in the novel, which was a choice I made with respect to a very long kind of process that I went through on a personal level. My son is autistic, so my husband and I had he's 17 and we talk openly about this, so he's very interested in the book at that level. But when I was pregnant with him, I had a brain clot and I wasn't expected to live. And I asked my husband when he was starting secondary school, would he have had a diagnosis? He was diagnosed as a young child. And he said, no, he didn't want to label him as a child. And so that was really the catalyst for the novel. And it's just, I don't come down on any side with respect to that, but Jamie isn't labelled in the book. And what I felt was, can we have empathy and can we live in an inclusive society without the constant need of categorization on a day-to-day basis, if that makes sense? So you meet someone and you try to instinctively understand.
Just I kind of wonder when you talk about where Jamie is in the future.
Yeah.
Like knowing some autistic,
I'm an
autistic relative myself, I know where she is now.
Yeah.
It's not
A good place. Yeah.
And I suppose that's the thing, like that if you don't have a label, you don't have the support.
Exactly. And that's how I would feel on a personal level, but I didn't want to put that into the novel with regards to that. Does that make sense? And I suppose Tess and Tig are so intuitive, and Tig not so much at the start, like, because, you know, Tig is his own, everyone has their own issues, so everybody you meet, you know, and there's a really murky complication to that that's not perfect, but I suppose it's not a textbook, but you're absolutely right. He could be anywhere. I really hope he's married to Terry, though. I really firmly believe that might have happened, because did you see, Terry always waited around. He was always hanging around. He really liked Jamie. And there's always one or two patient people, and, you know, that they love this about a person and vice versa. So I'm just, that's my hope anyway.
I loved the book, it was fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks a million. Any other?
Thank you so much. Really funny as well as everything else. I wanted to ask you about your other book, As We Were, I think it is, the hospital one, because I find it so powerful and funny and very realistic. And I was just wondering where the genesis of that came from.
From a lot of hospital admissions.
Right.
But totally fiction, genuinely, with respect to the characters, but just from spending months and months in a hospital bed, and just found it the most fascinating auditory experience with regards to the greatest tragedies unfolded on the ward and lost patients that I'd, you know, been beside. And also, it's a mixed gender ward, which people were really, like, critical of, and I was like, I've been on so many mixed gender wards. This happens, people. But just, there is great comedic, it was, yeah. One scene in As You Were that is real, I'm going to tell you this is because it's funny, was I wasn't able to speak for 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, I had no voice whatsoever, and I'd sprayed some Jo Malone perfume. I was in recovery in HDU, and this woman said, Elaine, St. Therese of Lisieux is coming for you. I can smell the roses.
Oh, God. Oh my God.
And they all started to say the rosary, and I was like, oh.
Oh God. Okay, go more, go do.
She was on her way, but she wasn't. But anyway.
She's on the way to the lovely perfume. That's so funny.
So that. But I just loved the people, yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, as an author and a poet, do you ever find that you have to, or sometimes you just instinctively separate your poetic and your narrative voice, or do you think your best work comes from maybe them cooperating with each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like some days I say the poetry is totally separate, my fiction is fiction, my poetry is quite the I. Obviously, in How to Build a Boat, the end, I totally indulge my poetic sense and just went there with that and just, yeah. But the poetry comes along, the fiction is work. Does that make sense? I sit and I work and I don't drink. And the poetry is a few glasses of wine and oh, la, 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 la. So it is that sort of, relaxed, go-to state of, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. Drinking and not drinking. Sorry.
Thank you all for those great questions and for being an amazing crowd. And thank you, Elaine, for such an amazing interview.